adapter do you have? Yeah, we've got an HDMI connector, which you don't have here. Shoot. Yeah, that's just USB, and that's another USB-C. That won't do it. Let me just go talk to Scott. Hold on a second.
Okay. Small technical glitch, but we're
Getting there? I'm giving everybody their 5-minute warning.
7 minutes.
Well, I'll tell them 5, but 7, it'll take them 10. That's how it goes. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to give you a heads up that lunch is almost complete and you'll want to start moving into the rooms for the next session. So you have about 5 minutes before the next session starts. If you need information on which session you'd like to attend, it's on your table. If you are staying in this room, we'd ask that you move to the front so that people are all close to the front. Thanks. 5 minutes.
That might be our best solution. Is this one right here? I'll let you do it. There you go. You have it built in that automatically fills it in for you. It might be in your keychain. You want me to unplug so we're not. Oh, no, that's your. Get this for the keychain. Save me a lot of time.
so it's
Okay, and then we'll go full screen with it anytime. Okay.
yeah, are you able to
Yeah, I'll be around to be able to set things up and switch between presentations and stuff. Yeah. I'll probably just park over here.
so you think I don't need to worry about touching anything?
Just tell me when you need it and I'll do it.
You're the best.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Phil's got a Mentimeter word cloud that he wants to build. So we're gonna do it on here because his laptop doesn't have the right connection. So I'll just come and get it up. And I'm Kim, yeah. So I'll just hover down, or I'll hover over here, and if there's any issues, like I said, I'll switch between presentations. My only issue would be if I
Hi, everyone. We're about to start the next session on securing funding for Sustainable Development Goals. And if it's possible, I know it's a little annoying, but if it's possible, could people just come up into the tables up front over here? We're going to be opening up a lot of discussion questions, so it makes sense to be sitting with a lot of other people to allow discussions.
Need two laptops because I've got a French and an English deck. So
Grow up lucky enough to
I gotta
learn that language.
I have to do that. It's good for you. Yeah. It's kind of our standard operating procedure. I know. In my world, it's important, and this will be on the web, so I gotta have that. Plus, there may be some people live streaming from Quebec. They're coming.
All right. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Phil. We really do encourage a lot of discussion in this session, so if you can make it out, that would be great. Anyway, I'm going to start. So good afternoon, and welcome to the Securing Funding for the SDGs workshop. My name is Shifa, and this panel is hosted by the Canadian Association of International Development Professionals, or CIDEP, as we are called. We're a network of development professionals, and CIDEP works actively to promote the interest of the international development community and provides a forum for members of this community to meet together to talk about matters of international development. And it also serves as a job search tool, which has been quite helpful for me. A little personal plug there. It's been a very handy resource with the kind of like network that we have access to, as well as the opportunities that are up there. Anyway, now this panel gets into the how of fulfilling the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically how to secure funding. The question being, how do you write a winning funding proposal for a development project? Our panelists will provide you across-the-board tips on good proposal writing, as well as specifics about the approach on how to reach out to Global Affairs Canada versus the UN versus other foundations and organizations. So, to my panel. First is Denise Buchner. Denise is an independent consultant with over 15 years of experience providing research, monitoring and evaluation services to a gamut of organizations, international organizations, governmental, non-governmental agencies. She will be speaking to proposal writers directly and on the act of proposal writing itself, so has a lot of advice to provide there. Next, we have Vaughan Lance from Global Affairs Canada. Vaughan is the Director of Partnerships for Development and Innovation. He's responsible for the calls for proposals secretariat, field relations, financial management, and was recently responsible for the planning, systems, and coordination of the Feminist International Assistance Policy. So he has much to tell us from the point of view of Global Affairs Canada. And finally, we have Hussein Amri, practice leader and senior advisor for performance measurement with Universalia Management Group. He's recognized as one of Canada's leading project development, design, and management professionals in international development, with substantial work experience in Asia and the Middle East, Central Eastern Europe, and the Americas. And he will speak about what funding windows exist in international organizations and how you can be successful when applying to them. So thank you so much for attending our panel today. Over the next hour, we will hear from each of the panelists first, about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we will take questions afterwards. Now, we're going to be using the Slido app quite extensively today, so I urge all of you to have that open and available. First, we're going to start with a poll. We just wanted to gauge who's in the audience and your experience with proposal writing. So we've got 2 questions up on the Slido app, and you have to type in #TogetherKaiDep to be able to access that. The first question is how much proposal writing experience do you have? I have no experience. I've been involved in preparing a proposal, like a little bit of experience, just 1 to 3 proposals, and the next one is a lot of experience, 4 or more. It's #TogetherKaiDep, and KaiDep is spelled as CAIDP. Oh, can you? I don't know, panel. Can you see? It's about a third has no experience,
Yep.
and then 67% is involved in preparing many proposals.
We've got some experienced folks here.
Yeah. And the next question is, which agency do you have experience writing proposals? Those of you that do have it. Oh, it's still changing. Oh.
Oh,
Yeah, it's kind of split, isn't it?
yeah.
So how many people are on the app? Okay. Oh, 13 people.
13 people?
Amongst all of us here.
Who responded?
Mm.
So when one person responds, it changes it because the denominator is quite small.
Yes, if you can activate the next question. So it is about 45% is no experience, and 31% is a lot. Yeah. Now, the second question is, I have worked on proposals for Global Affairs Canada, UN and IFIs, or foundations and others. Oh, I see. Oh, thanks, Bill. You can check more than one. So we have about similar number of votes as the first question, and it's 92% is on foundations and the others. Okay, well, thank you for that. Now, on to our panelists. First, we have Denise, and she will speak to about what makes a proposal stand out. Thanks, Denise.
Good afternoon. So I was actually glad to see that there's a mix of people who've had, when I saw the first blue, if everybody had all this experience, I thought, oh, what am I going to tell them that they don't already know? So maybe I have some insights for some of you that are very experienced and insights for those who are less. So my goal today is to be here less than 15 minutes and share with you some insights. I am, as was mentioned, an independent consultant. That's my current hat that I wear. I've also worked for many organizations, a number of organizations, and wrote proposals on their behalf. And interesting, when you said I had 15 years of experience, I thought, oh, I guess I should update that. I actually think it's like 30, if I'm honest. But this is one of my, a tip somebody gave me once, or I read it somewhere, something about not putting these huge years of experience in because it just seems a little ridiculous and ages you actually. So anyways, but over the years I've worked for many organizations, written many proposals, but I think actually the foundation of what I have done in my life started when I started doing like a master's degree and a PhD, because I was always really broke. So I always needed money. I always needed scholarships or grants or someone to help me pay for this great ambitious thing I wanted to do. So right from the start, I had to learn how to write something that would convince someone to give me money, how to put things on paper that people would actually read and it would win. So a lot of what I have to say is of use for many purposes, not just writing the proposal for the international organization. So hopefully I'm going to push the right button. Oh, I might need technical assistance here to get to the next slide. Yeah, that's it. What did you do?
The black button, which is hard to see.
This one?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. All right, so on my slides, I've actually only got, I think, 3 or maybe 4. I've got 19 tips for successful proposals, and my title is actually my first lesson. Because when I sat down and I said, well, what can I think of? What could I share with these people in this room? I thought of 19 things. And so I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to give them 19 things. I'm not going to turn it to 20 or 15 or 10, you know, a nice clean number. And that's my first tip, is when you're writing a proposal, give the reader what they need and no more. Don't fill it with a bunch of stuff they don't need. Just leave it to what you really need. And in this case, I came up with 19 things. So the first, oh, I have notes, so I don't have to look that way. Consider your time and resources. It was my first thought. So proposal writing is an investment, whether you're running a company or you're a student or you're writing a grant proposal. It's a big time investment. So look carefully at what you're doing and think, is this worth my time and resources? Like, what is my time worth? And consider that. And that follows closely with, are you qualified? So almost always, organizations that are sending out a call for a proposal will list the qualifications. And I suggest you thumb through to that piece, which is often at the end, early on, and see, do I have these qualifications? Because as you know, the landscape is very competitive. And if you don't have the qualifications, you might, you know, you're unlikely to make the mark. So that, you know, deciding whether or not to put your time and resources in is deciding, do I really have these qualifications? And sort of close to that is understanding the call. So that document that comes out, the call for proposals, is like a little piece of gold. It's what the funder has given you as your roadmap. So go through it, print it off, write all over it, pen it up, and really make sure you understand what are they wanting and can I do this? And when I answer this, what would I contribute? Now the fourth one is to ask questions. Yeah, there's 5 on this slide. The fourth one is to ask questions. So sometimes, not always, there'll be a contact person or a place where you can post a question. And I would encourage you to always ask a question. So always send in a question. I mean, probably you're going to have a question, like a legitimate question, because while the funder wrote the call and they understand what they want, you're reading it, so you don't have insider knowledge that they would. So, but it's also just a good way to get your name there so that they know they pay attention to your name or your company, who you are, and you might even, if you're lucky, be able to engage in a bit of conversation. And a lot of times these organizations will post these questions for other people who have put in an interest to apply. So pay attention to those as well when those come out, looking at those questions, because they'll often post them back to everyone. And my 5th point is to partner for success. So that goes up to number 2, are you qualified? Well, if you're not qualified, it doesn't mean you can't apply. Like a lot of us can't be the jack of everything. Like I'm a specialized person. I work largely in maternal and child health and monitoring and evaluations. So I have a very specific skill set, and sometimes I need to bring on partners. A recent proposal that I was working on had a wash component. Yes, I know lots about wash. Am I an expert? No. So I brought on a wash person. Water and sanitation and hygiene. So I brought on a person who would know about those things, so that I could, we could have a team that would have that particular skill set. So partner for success. And I guess that relates to, if you don't if you need somebody with a skill set, I would caution you about just picking anybody, like putting a note out on LinkedIn and connecting with anybody. Like look in your circle first, your inner circle, people you know. Maybe reach out to people you know, other people that they know, like expanding a little bit. But I would caution you from bringing on total strangers from across the world because it looks good on your proposal. If that person doesn't work out for you, can you carry the load? Because your name and your company is resting on the quality of the work that you do. And so, okay. 6th point is to use templates wisely. Templates are fabulous. You can't run your business or your company without a template. But they're not, you can't just go in and change the name of the organization and the amount on your budget and resubmit it. Everything you submit should be unique and specialized and answer directly to that call, even if you start with a template. Number 7 is do your research. So the call will often include a background piece on something about the organization or statistics in the country, something like that. But go a step farther. When you write your proposal and you put in your background piece, go in and find something else. Like, recently I applied for a maternal child health project, and the call had actually outdated statistics in it. I guess I kind of knew they were outdated, but I went and looked them up anyways to see if they were the most recent statistics. So when I sent the application back, I had the most recent statistics. But you can also add just other stuff you might know, about the country or about the context or about this type of work or something you find when you do research on that organization. So spend a bit of time for that. And then we move down to organize for clarity. And by that I mean, as I mentioned, the landscape is very competitive. You're going to throw your application or your proposal into the pot with 10, 20, 30, 40, I don't know, lots, possibly 100. How many?
More than that.
100? 200? Yeah. Okay. So if you're trying to apply for some of these things, there's a lot. And so how is your application going to pop? Like, where is your proposal? How does it stand out? How do you get to be the one that ends up getting circulated, the one of 5 or 10 that gets circulated around the core group? And this has a lot to do with organization. It has to do with your skills and your everything you can do, but it has also to do, a lot of people will have a lot of great skills and really could do the work, but if you can't put it on paper, if it doesn't pop out, if they're not going to look at it and say, look at this person, if they can't thumb through it and see all the little different headings and all the bits that are clearly explained and easily explained in accessible language, then you're not likely to get to the top. 9 is think through your methods. So every proposal has the methods section. It's often not the first thing, but if the funder is considering you, that's where they go. They're going to go look at your methods. And a lot of times these calls will sort of give you the methods. Like they'll say, we want you to do focus groups and a household survey or whatever they want you to do. And you can just give that back to them, put that in your methods and give it back to them just as it is. Or you can really think it through and you can add some value to it. And I would caution you to not change it a lot at the proposal stage, but it's okay to suggest, well, we could do focus groups. I suggest we do this many or in this many districts, or there's another thing I can think of based on what I've done in the past. Like, try to add a little value to those methods and make it something that just has a little piece to it that makes people think, hey, this person might have something to add here. Yeah. And there you go, and that's just leads into the next point, is what's your value added? Like, why are you different than the 200 proposals that are on the desk? What makes you and your team better than everyone else? And think about that and make that pop in your proposal. Now, okay. Writing. It's all about the writing, sort of. It kind of is all about the writing. It's kind of about also having something good to write about. but think about how you're writing, pay attention to how you write. Lately, I've been using, there's a little feature on your computer, it's the read aloud feature. It's up there if you're using a PC anyways. That'll read your text back to you. Use that feature because you'll be able to hear, maybe I'm an auditory learner, if you'll be able to hear what you've written, and you'll be able to say, oh, hang on, that isn't really very clear, or oh, I put of and it should be if, you know, or something crazy, like your spell checker has fixed something and it's completely the wrong word. And so think about your writing. And I think, you know, a lot of people in this room have a lot of education, a lot of skills, a lot of background. Like, it's okay to simplify your writing, to use something what we used to call simple language, like simple writing, like to stay away from the really high tech writing and write things out clearly. I actually had feedback recently from, it was actually a local NGO that had put out a call for a small little study for language assessment centers. And later, after I had done the work, he said, you know, the thing I really liked about your proposal is that I could understand it. You know, that some of them came and they were so technical and they had all this stats and all these fancy things, and I didn't know what they were going to do. But I understood what you were going to do. So watch your language and make it be clear. And that goes into using acronyms. You know, everybody loves acronyms in this field. There's a gazillion of them, and but do you really need to use them? You know, even things that are commonly known, if you're only referring to it once or twice in your proposal, write it out. So that your paragraphs aren't filled with all these acronyms and the poor person trying to read it is lost and having to flip to the acronym page to figure out exactly what you're talking about. Or if there's acronyms that aren't really well known, I would suggest writing them out. Include a cover letter. I don't know if that's standard issue, but that's what I do. You put a cover letter on anything. That's what makes when I talk about having your application pop, your cover letter is the thing that's going to make the difference. So your cover letter is 1 page, and it's got big margins. It's not, you know, really wide margins and crammed in a whole bunch of text. It's got some white space on the page. And in there, in that little bit of space you tell the funder everything about, this is what I bring to the table, this is what's unique about me, this is about my team, this is about my company, and it's just this one front page. Because I think a lot of times, I mean, maybe we'll get insights about what really happens I'd love to know actually, like, but I feel like, you know, they open it up and look at the cover letter, and from there they decide whether they're looking at the rest. Maybe we'll get some insights on that. I'm on 14, risks and limitations. So, you know, a lot of times we put all this work, we do our introduction and we get our methods, and by the time you've done the methods, you're exhausted. You're like, really? You want me to write about risks and limitations? Like, okay, fine, I'll make a section, I'll call it risks and limitations, and I'll think about it for 5 minutes and I'll throw something in there. No, risks and limitations, think about them. I just did an inception report for doing work in South Sudan. My risks section was 4 pages long. You know, it's like the project is so risky. I wrote out all these things, like think about your risks and what your limitations are, so that the funder knows, like, hey, this person has thought about this. They know the complexity, because when you're working, especially in the field of international development, but even in communities in Canada, there's complex issues, and if we're going to go in there and do work, we need to understand the complexity, and we need to be able to communicate about that. And that's similar with thinking about the logistics. Like, put that in your proposal, make a space for that, and which is, you know, do you need vehicles to drive people around? Do you need power cords? Do you need flip charts? Like, what do you need to do this work? Like, and think about that. That has implications later for your budget. Like, what do you really need to do the work? There we go. And the last 4 here is include a timeline. So again, thinking through what is the timeline? A lot of time these calls for proposals, a lot of times they're really quick. The work's going to start 2 weeks from now, and we want it done 6 weeks from now. And so think through that. Like, how could you do the work in that amount of time, and are you available to do it? You know, a lot of times it does get pushed, but you should think about it within the limits that they've called for. Budget realistically, that's really important, especially if you're not really dying to work for free. So like, think about how long this work is really going to take you. You know, I tend to err on the side of proposing a lower daily rate and a more reasonable amount of days to do the work. That's my preference, is just to be honest about the days that I need to do the work and then come up with like a daily rate that's reasonable for me to pay my costs and to live on. But that's, I think, a personal preference. But to budget realistically, make sure you've thought about all the power cords and flip charts and driving you need to do. How many kilometers are you going to drive, and what are you going to charge for that? And different things that you need, and put that into your budget, and budget realistically, keeping in mind that a lot of times funders are looking for, like, part of your ability to be successful is, are you competitive? Do you come in super high? So thinking, but if you just come in artificially low and you can't actually do the work for that much money, then there's some proposals that I see, calls that come out that I won't even apply for because they're unrealistic. You know, they'll have these massive amounts of work and they want them done, like they're giving 15 days and they want you to travel to somewhere and collect data and analyze it and come back and write a report. Well, you can't do it. So I won't even apply. And the last points, the 15 or the 18, does your CV showcase your strengths related to this call? So ideally, you might have several CVs that will highlight different things about yourself. So make sure you're highlighting the right things about yourself. And even usually in the proposal, there's a section where you write about yourself. Make sure you don't just copy and paste that from one to the other. Like, tweak it so you're talking directly about this particular call and how you have skills that relate to that. So save a couple versions of your CVs based on different types of work that you do. And update your LinkedIn page and your web page. Like, make sure they're up to date and they're there. And in your cover letter, put in your links and make sure your links are working. Because if they're interested in you, they will click on those links and they'll see. Because there's the place where you can really highlight yourself. You have like no page limits. You can just like write all your stuff in there. And if people want to read it, they can. You know, you can have as many pages as you want. So make sure you have that all up to date. So that's my 19 suggestions in a nutshell. I'm happy to talk to anybody. And I think we're doing questions kind of after, right? So I'm just going to hand it off now to find out exactly what happens when those proposals land. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much to CIDEP and to the Alberta Council for organizing this panel conversation. I'm calling it a conversation because although we're going to talk a little bit, we're looking forward to input from you, to questions from you, and having a little bit of a dialogue with respect to how we can be better in this space. From Global Affairs Canada's perspective, this is part of a continuing dialogue with respect to how we can improve the effectiveness of what we do in terms of the programming that is designed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. This is incredibly important. We're going to be talking about process during this panel, and some people might say, well, where's the fun in that? Process, you know, is one thing, but shouldn't we be talking about those incredibly important goals that we have set in the Sustainable Development Goals with respect to climate change, with respect to gender equality, with respect to poverty reduction? And the answer is, if we don't get the process right, we don't stand a chance of achieving those goals. We have to make sure that we've got effective programming with respect to results-based management, with respect to risk management, with respect to financial management. These are the building blocks that will get us there with respect to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we're going to lead through a presentation which is going to talk a little bit about the context for this. We're going to talk about the policy context, some of the funding mechanisms that we use at Global Affairs Canada. I'm going to do a deep dive on one of the recent calls for proposals as well with respect to small and medium-sized organizations. This was a big call. It was an important call coming out of the International Assistance Review and the new policy, Feminist International Assistance Policy. And so I want to talk a little bit about how that's gone, where we're at in that process, and some considerations for those that may have applied in that or maybe considering applying for future calls under that initiative. Then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. So the Feminist International Assistance Policy. It's been 1.5 years since we launched this. The policy, from my perspective, stands out in several key ways. First, it arose from the International Assistance Review, which involved extensive consultations here in Canada as well as abroad with stakeholders, with beneficiaries, with organizations that are involved in the implementation of programming. It was also the first policy review which took place in Global Affairs Canada in an integrated context. And one of the things you'll see when we talk about international assistance, it's different than international development, because it includes international security, which is a key programming mechanism which was previously in Foreign Affairs Canada, which is now part of the broader mix of mechanisms that we have in Global Affairs Canada, and it's absolutely crucial to achieving the sorts of development objectives that we've got outlined in the Sustainable Development Goals. We need a secure context in order for development to be effective, and international security programming plays a key part in that. So it's that more integrated approach that we're starting to see, which is one of the benefits of the amalgamation. I think the third and one of the most important things and one of the key features of the Feminist International Assistance Policy is its focus on gender equality as one of the key means of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and achieving poverty reduction. That is a feature which is there as a standout action area, but it also is encapsulated in all of the action areas under the policy. So this is one of the things which is vitally important as we look at proposals, either unsolicited or in calls, is that gender equality, how the proposal is going to help women and girls, is a centerpiece of what we're looking at. So I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes. One of the other things that was really important with respect to the Feminist International Assistance Policy and the International Assistance Review was the fact that we focused on how. I've been part of many international aid reviews in the past, and I can tell you that this is the first time that we looked at the question of how. How will we deliver? What sort of changes do we need to make to our mechanisms in order to be more effective? This has never been a feature of previous reviews. I was actually privileged to co-chair a task force with respect to this on delivery partnerships and innovation during the International Assistance Review. And we looked at a number of key factors here, and we heard from partners with respect to this. The key thing that we heard was, make global affairs easier to work with, please. And that was something that we heard loud and clear, and it's influencing how we've moved forward since then. We also heard about the importance of diversifying the partners that we work with, and we heard about the importance of exploring new and innovative ways in a context in which many of the traditional mechanisms that we've used have been bypassed by other mechanisms out there, including private sector engagement. So we need to make sure that we up our game in terms of the types of tools that we use. Doesn't mean that the old tools are not relevant, but it does mean that we need to enhance the number of tools and the types of tools we've got in our toolbox. I work in a branch of Global Affairs called the Partnership for Development Innovation branch. And we look at all of these issues from the perspective of the work that we do with Canadian partners. Our focus is on working with and supporting Canadian civil society organizations to work with overseas partners to achieve the priorities outlined in the Feminist International Assistance Policy and in the Sustainable Development Goals. This is different from other partners or other mechanisms within the department. We've got geographic programming that works primarily with country partners. We'll work with Canadian civil society organizations, but the primary focus is that engagement with country partners. As well, we have a multilateral branch, which is looking more at international financial institutions, UN institutions, et cetera. Our focus is, first and foremost, working with Canadian partners and facilitating that work in terms of the work overseas. There are two principal mechanisms that we use to engage Canadian partners. One is calls for proposal. The other is unsolicited proposals. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between the two of those. Calls for proposal call for proposals have a set budget already allocated. And before we let a call out, we already have a pool of money available and a sense of what we want to achieve with that pool of money. And so this is really important because in seeking that approval, we have outlined for the minister what we're seeking to achieve, and we have outlined some criteria with respect to that. Those criteria are clearly outlined on the launch page, and it's a competitive process. So anyone seeking to get some of the money that has been approved under the call, you're competing against a large number of other organizations, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Unsolicited proposals are very different. This is an idea that you have formed. You have set the criteria yourself with respect to what's the thematic area you're focused on, what's the geographic area you're focused on, what sort of results are you trying to achieve. So it's very much your idea. You're seeking a home for that idea by either coming to Partnerships for Development Innovation branch or a geographic program or some other part of the department that you're hoping may have some money available for that unsolicited proposal. It's not a competitive process. It's very much a question of you finding a home for that proposal where there's a fit in terms of the mandate and the scope of the proposal that you have in mind. So two very, very different contexts in terms of what you're up against. One in which you're trying to find a home. The other, there's a clear home, but you're up against a whole bunch of other organizations in terms of a competitive process. In order to try and make all of this easier, one of the things that we've been working on in the last year is something we call the Task Force for Improving Effectiveness. And in the last year, I've been privileged to chair that, working with a number of members from civil society organizations on the steering committee, including the Alberta Council. And Heather's been a member of the steering committee, and we've had fantastic collaboration in terms of that task force. That task force works with what we call solution teams. We identify issues, and we say, okay, here's some problems. Now let's put together a team of Global Affairs Canada employees and civil society partners, and let's work the problem and come up with some solutions. One of the areas that we've focused on in terms of a solution team is calls for proposals. So how can we make the calls for proposals system or mechanism more efficient, more effective in terms of getting us good proposals and good projects at the end of the day? More than 50 recommendations have come out of that process in the last year, and we've already implemented a large number of those. So this is, from my perspective, been an incredibly fruitful dialogue that we've had, and we've already had, I think, some really good process changes that we've seen. If we look at the recommendations that came out on calls for proposals, things such as give us more lead time. If you want us to have a good proposal, we as partners need to have sufficient lead time to talk to overseas partners and to put pen to paper and make sure that that actually is something that we can give you. So in order to make that real, we've committed to giving you advance notice of 8 weeks. We're going to give you lead time. We've got something coming up. Here it is. Be ready because we're going to be launching this within the next 2 months. And then an additional 6 weeks to actually put pen to paper and make sure that you've had sufficient time to actually give that proposal a really good airing in terms of reflecting the types of ideas that you've got in response. The other thing that we've put in place is a calendar of calls so that you've got, again, an over-the-horizon sense of what's coming up and an ability to prioritize. If you know that there's a call for proposal coming out on one topic, but a few weeks later there'll be another one, and actually you're more interested in that second one, that's then where you're probably going to put your effort rather than putting on something that may not be as good a fit for you. Need process clarity and transparency was another key ask from partners. And one of the things we've done there, Denise talked about this in terms of the importance of questions and answers. We publish those on the web. If you ask us a question during a call for proposal process, I can guarantee you it will be on the web for everyone to see, because we want to make sure that the answer to that is not available only to you, but it's available to everyone, keeping in mind this is a competitive process. We're also going to give you an indication of which questions and answers on that list are new and which ones are old. If you were into that last week, you don't need to reread what you just read before. You want to reread, or you want to read what's new, what's exciting, what is it that I haven't heard before. And so we're giving you a sense of that as well. One thing you've also told us very clearly is, don't make us work over the Christmas holidays, please. Don't set the deadline during the Christmas holidays or in the week after. We've heard you on that. We're not going to do that. Again, minimum 6 to 8 weeks to actually write it. And if we're going to set a deadline, it won't be January 5th, January 6th. It's going to be at least another week after that, so that you can enjoy a little bit of turkey with friends and family and not be worrying about that. Now, just a clarification there, that doesn't mean that we won't make you work during Christmas-like weather. Okay? Because if I look out the window right now, there are some cities in Edmonton where that can be a very long part of the year. So, so again, it's those Christmas holidays or other statutory holidays. Again, we're not going to set the deadline on Easter Monday. So, so we're trying to be reasonable, both to you and to ourselves in terms of the expectations that we're setting. There have been a lot of calls for proposals that have taken place in 2018. A lot of opportunities then for funding. I'm going to speak to a couple of those that are particularly important that our branch is responsible for. One is the small and medium-sized organizations call, and Denise was saying no, it's a higher number. It is indeed a high number in terms of the number of applications, 196. And I have it on good authority from Heather and others that in the next call under small and medium-sized organizations, we may be looking at even more. So highly, highly competitive environment. What I can tell you is that that was more than 10 times in terms of the actual ask for funding than we had allocated under that first call. So don't be surprised if about 90% of the organizations that applied in that first round were not successful. That is, in fact, the reality. So it is highly, highly competitive, and we're expecting it to stay that way. That's fantastic in some ways, in that it gives us a great pool of applications for proposals that we can choose from. But the downside is that there are a lot of organizations ultimately that will not be successful. We saw the same thing in the Her Voice, Her Choice call for proposals with respect to sexual and reproductive health rights. Again, large number of proposals asking for a large amount of money and about 10 times what we had actually allocated. So just keep that in mind. We certainly encourage you to apply, but keep the expectations realistic, noting that you're in a highly competitive process. Just to deep dive a little bit more on the small and medium-sized organizations call. The objective there was very much to diversify the types of partners we work with. It was to target types of organizations rather than looking at a specific SDG or action area or geographic region. So in some ways, this gave you a huge amount of flexibility in terms of the type of proposal to present to us. But keep in mind, there was a very specific type of organization we were looking for. It was an organization that was much smaller than some of the traditional partners we've been working with. And we were hoping for organizations that were fairly new in the space. We got a lot of proposals from new organizations, and several of those will ultimately be successful. But this is a new space, and we recognize that for many organizations, this was their first time in actually applying to Global Affairs Canada through this type of mechanism. There will be another call under the small and medium-sized organizations window early in 2019. So if you were not successful in the first round, do keep that in mind. There will be another round, and there will be, in fact, a further one after that. So it wasn't a one and done. It was very much a continuing process, and this is part of that predictability that we're trying to give to you. So what's the system look like? What's the interior of this? As Denise was saying, so this is where maybe it gets a little bit interesting in terms of the internal mechanism. How do we actually assess your proposal? First and foremost, eligibility criteria. This is absolutely essential because what we're going to do is we're going to list on the call page when we launch criteria such as the size of the project, the duration of the project that we're looking for. Is there a geographic or thematic focus involved in it? Are we looking for cost share? If so, how much? What type of organization are we looking for? So these are just examples. Every call differs. So look really closely at those eligibility criteria because they will never be the same. Each call will have something different. And that's really, really important for you because if you get any of those wrong, we will screen you out. We have to apply those criteria equally. We can't make exceptions because if we're doing that, then we're not being fair and transparent. So it's really, really important that you pay close attention to that. Those criteria are absolutely essential to being screened in and for us to actually get into the meat of what you've given us in terms of the proposal. So look very, very carefully at that. Merit assessment, that's where we actually look at the proposal and say, okay, what have we got here? Is this something that we think could potentially be a good project? So it's the content of your proposal. We're going to be assessing a number of items there. I've listed them on the slide. Alors, il y a vraiment beaucoup de critères, beaucoup de contenu qu'on cherche dans une proposition. We really are looking for a proposal that's going to make a good project. And I'm going to come back in a moment in terms of where we saw a lot of strengths in what we were receiving and where we saw some weaknesses. Parce qu'il y avait vraiment des points forts et des points faiblesses. Best fit, it's quite likely, and it has been the case recently, that some of the proposals that make it through the merit assessment, that they will still not be funded. And the reason for that is we may very well have simply too many good proposals. And in that context, we're going to look at best fit, which is what are the strongest proposals that most closely align with the criteria that we've outlined and what we're trying to do. So if we look at some of the more recent calls, that was very much the case. We did get to a best fit assessment where we were simply saying, okay, of these X number of proposals, what are the best of the best that we're going to proceed with? And although there are others that pass merit, we simply don't have enough funds to fund them all. Again, supply and demand. And in these proposals, both the Her Voice, Her Choice and the SMO, the demand far exceeded the supply that we had allocated. Lessons on eligibility. Important to know, about 30% of applicants were screened out at this stage because they did not meet all of the eligibility criteria. And that's a real shame, because that means that we did not go on to read the proposal. So absolutely essential that you pay close attention to what we put on the eligibility criteria, because that means either you're in terms of us looking at the proposal or you're not. Some key areas there to look at. If you're trying to demonstrate experience in a sector, really make sure it speaks strongly to the experience you've got. We can't make assumptions. We may have even worked with you in the past. We know you've got that experience, but if it's not demonstrated in the proposal, we can't give you the benefit of the doubt, because we can't do that for organizations that we don't know. We can't do it for organizations that we know. So it's really important that you demonstrate that experience strongly, and there were certainly cases where, for example, projects on water, sanitation and hygiene, that the experience simply wasn't fully demonstrated. Even though we have a general awareness that that organization probably does have that experience, we couldn't make that assumption based on what we were seeing on paper. Financial statements. If we ask you for financial statements, make sure you give them to us. If you don't, that's a problem. If we ask for cost share and you don't indicate what that is, that's a problem. The duration. If we're asking for a 5-year project, don't give us a 6-year project. If it's a minimum of 2 years, don't give us 1 year. It's got to be the right duration. We're looking for a certain time frame. We've got a certain amount of money available over a certain duration, and the funds need to be allocated to projects that meet that. and the status of the organization. In this case, for example, with the small and medium-sized organizations, we had certain criteria with respect to the size of the organization. If your organization did not meet those criteria, it was screened out. So again, be clear on that in terms of what we're looking for and in terms of the type of organization. If in doubt, and this is something that Denise said and I strongly support, ask us. Let us know that it's a question. If there's something unclear in the criteria, give us that, and we will respond in writing on the website, not only for you, but for everyone else. And so that's really important. We had more than 100 questions in the small and medium-sized organizations call, and every one of those was answered on the site. So clearly there were a lot of questions. There may be in the next one as well. Keep asking them, and we'll keep clarifying what it is. And if we're not clear in the response, ask us again. One really important point here. If you look at the call, both in terms of what we're looking at in the criteria, and you don't quite see yourself in it, but you've got this fantastic idea that you'd like to put in anyway, don't do it. That's an unsolicited proposal. Go that route anyway. If you've already got an idea and it's something on a different topic, then give it to us as an unsolicited proposal rather than applying through the call, because you're going to get screened out. If you wrote it for something else, we're going to see that it was written for something else, and we're not going to consider it as part of the call. So don't be disappointed. Put it in as an unsolicited proposal. That's the way to go with that. All right. So lessons on merit assessment. We had a large number of organizations, 70% that made it to the merit assessment. The majority of the ones that got screened out at this point in time were for two reasons. One, managing for results, the other, risk. Those were the two areas of weakness that we saw across the largest number of proposals. So managing for results. This is absolutely essential. Because if we don't see strength in terms of managing for results in the proposal, we're going to assume that we're not going to have strength in terms of the implementation of the project in terms of management for results. And I can tell you from some of the operational projects we've got right now, there are weaknesses in this area with respect to Canadian capacity. Managing for results is not our strongest point. So we're going to be quite rigorous in terms of assessing this. We're also going to be looking at capacity building for Canadian organizations in this context. We've got web documents out there as well, which provide guidance in this area. This is absolutely essential, because if we're going to achieve the sustainable development results or goals, it's going to be through really, really strong management for results. So key points here, start with the result, not with the activity. Look at what it is we're trying to achieve, and then look at what sort of things we can do to achieve those results. Don't do it in the other direction, because if you start with the activity and then say, well, what could we achieve with this activity, you're probably not going to be relevant to the context in which you're working. Start with the result. It's really important. Yes?
I'm noticing lots of people are taking really notes and taking photos of your slides and whatnot. It's being recorded, and you can access it after if you want, just to save yourself. If you want to just listen, we can get it to you later.
And I'd be happy to flip you a copy of the deck as well after. I don't have it in hard copy here, but I can send it to you electronically. No worries. No, that's good. So there's some really important stuff here in terms of management for results. We heard yesterday about simple problems, complicated problems, complex problems. I can guarantee you everything we're dealing with in international assistance is a complex problem. These are incredibly complex issues we're dealing with in foreign countries with many actors in play, both domestic actors as well as foreign donors. These are very complex problems. We need to really work hard to understand the context, to understand who is involved in trying to find solutions, who may be resistant to some of those solutions, and what sort of approaches can be used. And that's where the theory of change comes in terms of what is it that we can do to actually make that result come about. Logical links between the levels of results are really important, and sustainability is absolutely key. Sustainability in terms of when this project is over, what's going to remain in place in the long term. absolutely essential, because what we want to avoid is a scenario in which the project ends and then, you know, shortly thereafter there's no sense of the project ever having been there. That's not a success. And sustainability does not come from phase 2. Sustainability comes from achieving something that's lasting under the existing initiative. Responding to risks. Complex problems, inherently risky environment. Every project that we're implementing overseas entails risks. We cannot assume away those risks. What we can do is we can plan for them, demonstrate that we have planned for them, and demonstrate that we have mitigation plans, so that when those risks happen, and it will be when, it won't be if, we know what to do, and we've got a sense of how we're going to respond. And so if you can demonstrate that to us, that's what we're looking for. If you assume away the risk, or you know, are hesitant to state the risk because you think it might undermine your ability to get funding, it's exactly the opposite. If you don't state the risk, it gives us a sense that you're not prepared to encounter the risks that are out there. So be robust. Again, Denise said, I think it was 4 pages of risks. Perfect. Give us a good, really good story on the risk in terms of your awareness of it and how you're going to respond to it. Because that's, again, one of the key areas where we saw weaknesses in the proposals. It's got to be eyes wide open. Gender equality and human rights. This was better. This was an area where some organizations fell short, but a large number had clearly been looking carefully at this, looking at the messaging we were putting out in the Feminist International Assistance Policy, and we're really treating this seriously. So some really good stuff here. Having said that, where there were weaknesses, it had to do with perhaps a lack of connection with local partners in terms of what the partner views were on this, the local context, how amenable this was to gender equality. So that preliminary GE analysis may not have been present. How are men and boys going to be involved? Because although we're looking at women and girls as the key vehicle to achieve poverty reduction, looking at gender equality and how to level the playing field also involves engagement with men and boys. There are behaviors that need to change there in order for women and girls to have the types of benefits we're trying to seek. So speaking to that engagement is also really, really important. And then again, a broader human rights analysis. There is more in play than gender equality. There are other types of rights that we're looking to affect in a positive way here. And yesterday we heard about some of those with respect to the disabled, with respect to the LGBTQI population. How are we going to affect matters with respect to those larger human rights issues that are in play in the countries? Final area in terms of the merit assessment we can talk to, again, relatively strong in terms of this, but environment is still a really important issue. There's some legislated mandate issues involved here in terms of the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act. We need to make sure we're not doing any harm through what we're funding, whether it's in Canada or overseas. There were organizations that proposed and said there wouldn't be no environmental element to the project. And then in another part of the proposal, they spoke to some of the environmental elements to the project. So consistency in terms of this, if there isn't an environmental element, that's fine, but make sure that is indeed the case, and that it's not simply that you've stated that, but then indicated maybe that you're going to do some renovations of schools in another part of the proposal. We need to have an assessment of that in terms of how you're going to treat the environmental impact. Next steps. We're right now in the process of gathering lessons from the first call on small and medium-sized organizations. We're working with provincial councils and the Canadian Council for International Cooperation on this. A survey has just been put out with respect to that. We're going to send that survey out ourselves as well to make sure that all organizations that have applied under the recent SMO call get a copy of that survey. And we want to get your input. That input will be generic, and you will not be specifically identified with respect to that. It doesn't matter who we get the input from. We need to get your sense of how that process has gone, where you see the weaknesses in that process, and how the process can be better run in the future. So it's going to be really important for us. We also want to disseminate lessons. This is part of that process today, but we'll be having webinars. We'll be putting information out on our website, and we'll be doing meetings with proposing organizations that have specific questions. So we're looking at the month of November as fairly intense in terms of this, in terms of getting as much information out there so that the next time we run a small and medium-sized organizations call, it will be more effective, things will be clearer, and you'll have a better sense of what it is that you need to be successful. Having said that, the supply-demand issue won't go away. Greater capacity means that the proposals we get are going to be better, but at the end of the day, if we still get upwards of 200 proposals, there's still going to be a large number of proposals that are not successful. So just keep that in mind. Supply and demand is going to be a constant feature of this space from what we can see going forward. We will be doing capacity building activities going forward, working again with the provincial councils on that. There will be a number of other calls coming up. We've already indicated on our website a new call that will be launched shortly on education for girls. There will be another call coming up with respect to the volunteer cooperation program. And in the new year, there will be another call with respect to small and medium-sized organizations. So lots and lots and lots of stuff coming up with respect to this. Prioritize which ones you want to look at, because I would suggest maybe it's not a good plan to apply for them all. Final thoughts. We've got a detailed website which can help you a lot. We've got documents out there such as not only the policy, but detailed guidance on results-based management, tip sheets, as well as a detailed guide. I think that guide, that was my previous team that wrote it, is 90+ pages. Everything you need to know about results-based management is in there. If you haven't read it, please do before you apply, because there's some really, really good advice in there with respect to not only how to put together a proposal with respect to this, but how to implement a project with respect to this. Really, really helpful. How we assess your proposal. Can you just ask the question, want to know what's inside that black box? That document will tell you. So click on that and find out more, and then again, there's some information out there with respect to the various things we're planning to do under small and medium-sized organizations. Alors, ce sont les renseignements d'aujourd'hui. On peut discuter davantage plus tard, pas seulement pendant cette discussion, mais cet après-midi. So really looking forward to having a chat about this here as well as later in the day, but also in the coming days. Both myself and Deputy Director Shannon Fougere is here, so we're available to chat with you about any specific questions you've got with respect to either recent calls or upcoming calls. Lots of things happening, and looking forward to having those discussions. Merci beaucoup.
Good afternoon. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks a lot. That was a really interesting presentation. I know I took a lot of notes, and I know I've lost a lot of proposals too. So the only way to win proposals is to keep writing them. Don't ever give up. That's my first bit of advice for the afternoon. Really happy to be back in Edmonton. Was here a couple of years ago. I don't know. See a couple of guys who were here from the IFI boot camp. So I'm gonna focus on non-global affairs opportunities today, and there are a wide range of them. Just to repeat what Vaughn said, this presentation will be made available. And unlike my colleagues, my PowerPoint has close to 50 slides in it. So I will endeavor to go very quickly, but only focusing on the most important things. Most important, there are many opportunities out there for you. And unlike the past, where there were single portals, we have opportunities which are decentralized, opportunities that are thematic, opportunities that are sectoral, opportunities that are geographic, and funding opportunities that come through even religious portals. So when I was thinking about, just the things that we've been applying for this year, and won, International Labor Organization, United Nations organizations, multilateral funding organizations, international associations, foundations, and large academic organizations. So that's just that range that I put up there are ranges that we won. Notice I left out the ones that we lost. So those ones are typically the smaller ones, the NGOs, the international NGOs, because the firm that I work for, the rates are arguably higher because it's a private sector. Now, if you come from the NGO, raise your hand if you come from an NGO. Okay, so you have a competitive advantage that your rates will be lower, by the way, generally speaking. So arguably, when you're presenting proposals, be they to global affairs or any of these other ones, you have that comparative advantage. Now, I've lost proposals this year. I lost 2 back-to-back by 1 point. And boy, was I upset. And I said, I want to win. And I'm going to do whatever I can to win. Losing by 1 point, when you lose by 1 point twice in a row, then you go, I'm going to win the next time. That's what you do. And we won 4 in a row after that because you just don't want to lose again. It's just too hard on you. So why did we lose on 1 point? We lost because of the money, the financial proposal. So much of the discussion here was not about the financial proposal, but the financial proposal is typically, now we're drifting towards 80-20. That means the score is 80-20. It used to be 70-30, but we're seeing more 80-20. So the qualitative aspect of it is really important. But there is this portion where the weighted average, and I can mention, but I won't, the title of a global affairs project where we were ahead by 100 points, but we still lost on the financial. So that means you got whooped on the financial, by the way, if you were that far ahead. So you want to make sure that you take care of the whole range of those opportunities and the whole portion of the proposal, not just the technical, but the financial as well. So a lot of people, they wait till the very end to prepare their financial proposal. Don't do that. You have to make a schedule, you have to make a responsibility matrix, and you have to know what the competition is. So when Vaughn pointed out that he has a couple hundred proposals out there, don't bet your organization's future on a proposal that you put in where there are 200 competitors. That is not sound planning. You have to look at the spectrum of opportunity, and you have to look at the biggest opportunities out there. And the biggest opportunities out there are the UN organization system. The UN organization system covers like a huge structural aspect of it. And I'm going to put up a chart in a second that will show you just the amazing range of these things. And the system includes pretty much every organization there is. These UNICEF, WFP, the World Health Organization, United Nations, UNDP. I'll just use the acronyms. I know I'm not supposed to because it's too long. UNFP, the Food Program, UNAIDS, UN Women, UNESCO. We have won proposals with every single one of these, by the way. So these are viable opportunities. We're a Canadian firm, so we have a competitive advantage based on our currency differentiation right now, by the way. I don't like to brag about that, but it's true. So when our currency goes up, we win a little less, or we have to take our rates a little down. But we make a little bit more money, too, in terms of the profitability of these things. So you can review all of these organizations right here. They have a list of them on that link, and again, this will be made available to you. For personnel, for individuals, you have to fill out what's called a P11 form. So P11 is basically your CV. So once you prepare that P11, you're going to be able to apply to all of these various tiny UN organizations right here. This is a much bigger slide, but I couldn't get it to fit there. So when you see this on the website, you're gonna be able to click on any one of these links and you'll see the opportunity. But the most important thing is to fill out that P11 form. So even if you're just working in an organization and your organization, you still have to apply with the P11 form. So that's a UN organization tip. If you haven't completed the P11 form, complete the P11 form now. So you can see on this page here is a hyperlink list of the organs and the specialized agencies. So there are typically, I would say, more opportunities available on the specialized agencies than on the UN organs. It's a little bit just varied, but I just make a general statement here for the people who are in the room here, because on the UN specialized agencies, you see things like the World Bank. So the World Bank is classified as a UN special agency. And you have to approach this with like a really broad mind, by the way, when you're doing business development, in particular when you're pursuing opportunities. So earlier in the year, we were looking at some opportunities, and we saw one, and it was in Montreal, and our organization is based in Montreal, and it was International Civil Aviation Authority organization. We were like, hey, that looks pretty interesting, but we don't know anything about aviation. We're like, but we can do that. So we did it, and we won. And so on Friday, our evaluation will be presented to the General Counsel of the International Civil Aviation Authority, and it was in Montreal. And that was great. That was a block away from our office. And we're like, this is the best project ever, right? Because we didn't have to go anywhere. They took the metro, they went to there. We had somebody in there for 3 months straight. Like, that's a good job. And all they did was fill in that P11 form. Fill in the P11 form. That's what you want to do. That's a great starting point for a really easy opportunity. Now, let's have a look around the rest of the country and see where there's other UN organizations. That's what I did. Not to belabor the point, but we won another one that way. So tip on the UN agencies, they're out there, they're there. There's more of them than anybody else. And I'll tell you, when you go to Global Affairs Canada and you tell them, I always tell them, hey, I was just working, and I was telling Vaughn and Shannon at lunch, hey, I just won 2 World Bank projects with the Multi-Donor Trust Fund. And then Vaughn gave me advice about how to work with the Multi-Donor Trust Fund. And you bet I'm going to go back tomorrow to work, and I'm going to take Vaughn's advice. Because in this country, we have a lot of knowledge, and we need to access the knowledge base. Don't look at your neighbors as your competitor. Look at them as your friends, your advisors, your supporters. They may not be great partners, no offense, because they're not really going to help you, but they might be great assets to you in terms of advice. So just not to belabor the point, but one of the things that Vaughn said, one of the problems with the trust fund I was working with is the donors were dropping out because they weren't getting good reports, which is exactly what he said. And I go, hey, Vaughn, that's what I told them on Friday. So this is knowledge base in our government who worked with these guys before. So often you might be able to call up your friends here in Canada and ask them for advice on how to pursue these opportunities. They probably would be able to give you some good tips. And when we do the IFI boot camp here, we bring in the Government of Canada agencies here to give advice, to give support to Canadian organizations to pursue international opportunities. They're quite helpful. So where do you find these things? You find them in the global marketplace. That's actually what it's called, ungm.org. So go to ungm.org, you'll find all of the information there. $17 billion worth of possible markets. It's a single window portal where you can go in there and get whatever you need. 99% of the money spent goes through that portal. So I hang around that portal a lot, by the way. It's a handy place to be. So you can register on the portal. You have to register on the portal. If you don't register on the portal, you won't get in. So you have to pick which level you want to register on. So if you're looking for small contracts, you register at the basic level. If you're looking at level 1, it's up to $500,000, and level 2, over $500,000. So you have to pick one of the 3 levels, you click on it, then you register. So last year, for example, using the portal, we produced opportunities from 6 different specialized agencies. This year, so far, 8. So the portal works, and the portal contracts range in size from the smallest ones to I think the biggest one we won was around $3 million off the portal. which is pretty good. You know, typical competition around 7 versus 200. I don't like the sound of that, by the way. 200. 200. Like it's. I think you have better. In the roulette, it's only 36. Why do you register? Well, you have to register through the procurement division so they can all access the single portal. So it's like when you use ADB registration system, you go in through the ADB portal, and all of the officers can look through there, and they can actually find you and give you a job, believe it or not. So if you have a P11 in there, and you've registered on the portal, they might just call you up and say, hey, do you want to come to work? It happens. But not if you don't register, and not if you don't have your P11 done, and not if your staff don't know what UNGM is. So you get nothing if you don't know what it is. You don't go there. So there's a certain portion of opportunists who are hanging around UNGM all the time. Just go in there every day, first thing in the morning, look, you'll find something, every day, every single day. That's how many there are there. You can find them earlier on the Expression of Interest website. So typically these things are posted just like Global Affairs does, well in advance. Then the opportunity comes up. Then you're ready. Always be ready. Always be bid ready. If you're not bid ready, you're too late. Global Affairs is very generous, by the way, 6 to 8 weeks. World Bank gives you 10 days, typically. Maybe if you're lucky, 3 weeks. So you sort of have to have all your systems in place. So again, here's the hyperlink. So in this presentation, just to expedite it, you'll find all the links you need to register on the UN system, all the sites and how it works. So when you apply for these things, make sure that you have all your stuff together. So if you click on the prerequisites for eligibility link, you'll see what you have to declare. If you can't declare, similar to Global Affairs, then don't waste your time. Go back, get ready, make sure everything's all in order. Those are downloadable PDFs, by the way. The code of conduct, there is a GM guide. I tried to bring it with me, but it's 90 pages long. So in the interest of the environment, I put the hyperlink there. So you want to just click on that, go in there, and you'll find everything you need. And it'll help you fill out the supplier registration in case you have any challenges. So what are the typical characteristics of the system? You'll see one, again, repeating, you need to register. Don't hang around the marketplace without having a password and a username. Otherwise, you'll click on it, try to register, and there'll be nothing there. So, 2, there's different types of tender notices. You can filter them by EOI, publication date, RFP. So if you're only looking for RFPs, you can just find RFPs. Qualifications. I think what we heard earlier is, don't go applying for things you're not qualified for. And if you work in specific sectors, follow your sector expertise. Like if you're an education specialist, but you might also be an expert in planning. If you're a health specialist, you might also be an M&E specialist. So you can have multiple specializations. It's just some of them are sectoral and some of them are thematic. Remember, you don't get sole source. Competition is guaranteed. So, but the good thing is typically the competition is less than 5. Less than 5 is good. Sometimes you'll see 8, 9. That's unusual. Like the one we just won, I was so suspicious. And in competitive bidding, you get really, really suspicious. I was so suspicious. I was like, maybe we shouldn't do this. This got 8 people. 2 of them were our former partners. And I was like, why are they on there? So I went to our president and I said, do you want to bid this? She said, no, it looks too hard. And I'm like, it looks too hard. Now we're going to do it just because you said it looks too hard. Because if it looks too hard, it's going to be, everybody else must think it looks too hard. That's a good thing. But is it doable, like we heard? If they just give you like 10 days. So they didn't have a budget. I looked at it, I was like, I don't care. I'm going to put down what I think it needs to do this job. I'm going to put down exactly the level of effort. I'm going to break it down by the micro, and I did. And when we won, they came back and they go, you know, this is so detailed. What are we going to do? I go, well, now we need to be flexible, right? We don't need to do everything that we put in here. So if you break it down, then you can roll it up, right? But if you haven't broken it down, now you've got some work to do. Right. So the better you plan, the better your proposal. The better your financial proposal. The better your personnel proposal. The better your mobilization proposal. The better, what did you say? If I have to get from A to B, like mobility. Like, how long did it take me to get to Edmonton? Do I need the most direct flight? How long do I take to get home? Can I go to Washington in the day and back? Do I need a hotel room? Those kinds of things. That's the difference. Now, they always say reimbursables don't count, but they do, by the way. So, moving away from the UN to the IFIs. So, how many people want to work with IFIs? World Bank, that kind of thing. I know you do. But that's one, just one. 1, 2. Yeah, okay, I know. So I won't belabor the point. I think we probably, if there's only a couple people here who want to focus on that, then maybe we should talk separately, because how many people want to ask Vaughn questions about global affairs? Yeah. So I'll just go quickly through a story about the IFI. There's a bunch of them. World Bank, Asian Development Bank, Inter-American Bank, the Caribbean Development Bank, and the African Development Bank. Now, fortunately, I always tell people, usually, I come from a time when Global Affairs, CETA used to tell us, hey, work your way up to the banks. So we worked with Global Affairs, CETA, to get to the point where we could compete against the rest of the world. This is global competition. So it's not like, it's very difficult. So you need to have systems and processes, and you need to understand how they work, and you need to have regional experience in similar projects. You need to have partnerships. You need to understand how the bank staff work, how the executing agencies work. These are typically lending or grants. So a country borrows money from the bank, then you have to deal with the country and the bank. Like, it's not easy. Then there's a country office, and typically it's a very complex assignment. But like all the other ones, there's opportunities at each stage in the process. So I like to say, like, if you're good at planning, there's opportunities for planning. If you're good at monitoring and evaluation, there's opportunities at monitoring and evaluation. And if you're good in a particular sector, there's opportunities like niche specializations in health, environment, agriculture, lots of opportunities that road infrastructure. So when I was out here last, we were talking a lot about road infrastructure, energy, mining. Those are big sectors now. Infrastructure, there's different kinds of selection processes. Quality cost, quality, fixed budget, least cost, consultant qualification. So if you're interested in this, fill out a P11, get it in the system. Find out what they're doing. On the pipeline, you can see. On the pipeline, there's 1,142 projects right now. So there's lots of opportunities in those 1,100 projects, you know. The total forecast is $109 billion. And if any of these countries interest you, this is where the bulk of current allocations are in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and the top 10 African countries. Of the top 10, the top 4 are Nigeria, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and Kenya, which, interestingly enough, are the top 4 countries that correlate to the African Development Bank and Global Affairs Canada, although I'm not so sure about Nigeria. So most of these opportunities are presented through something called eConsult 2. Now, if you're registered on eConsult 2, you can punch that in, and all of a sudden you see opportunities right away. That's what it looks like right there. So you'll see the list, you'll see the value, you'll see the deadline date. Now, they typically only give you a week, 5 days to put it in. So that's what I mean, like, you gotta kind of be batty. So in the template, you'll see these hyperlinks. you can click on any of these ones. You can see who contract awards go to. Just to give you one tip that, in case you do get into this business that I use, I go on the contracts awarded. I see who won. Then I typically email those guys and call them and go, hey, I hear you won. Do you need any help? It's a great way to get into the market. And I don't ever tell the other guys. I'm like, hey, I'm just doing this. And sometimes it works. Hey, you never know. So go down that route, just in particular specialized areas. I wouldn't do that for everything else. So just to wrap up, I'm going to skip all this and go right to that. I just need one more minute. So when we talk about partnering for success, because often, like a lot of people ask me about this, I think it's a good thing to partner for success. I think it's one of the things that Canadians need to really improve upon. Find out what you can add to the other and put together something that's better in a unified moment. You'll have greater levels of success. And I think what Vaughn was putting down about the way you evaluate things. Global affairs is very demanding in terms of the fundamental sections that they ask you for. But all of those things are important in every other market as well. So you're being asked to look at things that everyone else is going to ask you anyways. So you might as well get used to it, and you might as well get good at it. I think governance used to be a big thing, but I didn't see that on the list there. So just one last point here about the kinds of things that the others are looking at. So they're looking at the experience of the firm, your key personnel, your product, your management capacity, and of course your financials. But what Vaughn was talking about results, focus on how you're going to achieve something, what it really means, not what you're going to do, not whatever activity you have in mind, but what you're going to produce with the Government of Canada's investment, what you're going to do to produce with these funding opportunities that's going to mean something towards the achievement of at least one of the Sustainable Development Goals. Use the SDG indicator database to anchor your presentation. So if you're managing for results, you need to be able to measure it. You need to be able to report it. You need to be able to accurately present your achievements. Value for money is essentially what we're talking about. So to be successful, look how quickly I was talking. Get to the market. Partner, research, bid, learn, register, finance. If you don't have the money, you're not going to get the honey. Okay, so you got to invest in these things. Don't look at bidding as gambling. Look at it as an investment for the future. Don't look at preparing proposals as a risk. Look at it as putting the foundations for your future in the organization. So the more people you get involved, the more people you get trained, the better the results are going to be. So that's why you have to keep trying and try again, because you're not going to win every time. You know, it's not going to happen. If you win 1 out of 4, you're doing a great job. Sorry, I was talking so fast. But for more information, you can contact me there. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much again for all that valuable insight, for Denise's 19 tips, to Vaughn's look on behind the scenes, what's going on, to Hussein's straightforward advice on what to do. Thank you, panelists. Thank you so much. I understand that we have a break, but we're going to open it up to just about 5 or 10 minutes of questions. I understand you guys have a lot of questions. So instead of using the app again, we'll just keep it informal. So if you raise your hands and stuff, we can call you out. Yes.
Yes, Vaughn, I have a question for you, and it's a question that's actually for your boss rather than for you. You had 200 proposals, and you had to turn down many of them. But these 200 proposals represented the willingness of Canadians to invest themselves and their money on behalf of international development. And I'm wondering, this motivation strong enough that they're willing to put their own money on the line?
Do we want to take a couple, or do we want to answer one at a time?
I think while everyone gathers their questions, you can answer
Sure.
this one. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, the short answer is we're very much interested in working with Canadian organizations, and that's why we've launched the recent calls. We've allocated $100 million to the small and medium-sized organizations initiative. That's 5 times what the original ask was from provincial council partners. So we very much recognize the importance of this. We were overwhelmed by the response to the first call. That was fantastic, and it did demonstrate an incredibly strong response from Canadian organizations. We had originally thought we were going to do 4 calls under the development impact window. We decided that we would fund actually more initiatives under the first call, and we've canceled the 4th, so that we reallocated money from that back end to the front end, so we could support more at the front end. You know, if you think it's a good initiative, if you'd like to see more of it, let us know, because that's an important signal as well. But you know, it's ultimately, as is the case with every call, not every proposal is going to be successful. There will be a large number that will be successful, but there'll be an even larger number that will not be, and that's going to be the reality under these calls. But there will be another one coming up, and certainly we're interested in seeing some good proposals coming out of that too.
So we have a couple of questions on the app, and they've been liked, so people really want the answers to these ones. So the first one is, noting that small and medium organizations are applying for calls for proposals at 10 times what was expected, are there plans to increase that funding envelope by 10 times?
So the answer is no.
Okay.
That would be $1 billion, and we're not planning to put $1 billion into this. Having said that, after we've gone through the initial sets of calls for the $100 million, is there a possibility of doing more? That'll depend on decisions to be taken by the government at that point in the future, and also depend on the feedback we get from you. As I mentioned earlier, we're doing a survey right now with respect to how the first call went, and we're going to be looking forward to your views, not just on process, but on the importance of that call to future programming. So if you think it's important, respond to that survey and let us know your views.
Another one that's quite interesting, does sustainability apply exclusively to projects that only require one-time funding? And I apologize, they're all to one.
Sustainability applies to absolutely everything we do, because sustainability is about results. It's about achieving a result whereby a girl can go to school this year, and if the project is no longer in place next year, she can still go to school, because we've set the policy environment, we've set the processes, the facilities are there, the security context is there to facilitate that girl continuing to have her education. So that's what sustainability is all about. It's about achieving a result during a project in tandem with other programming that's likely taking place, because as I said, these are complex issues. It's not going to be one initiative or one project or one intervention that's going to make the difference. It's going to be a combination thereof. But if we're sustainable, it means that what we've put in place will continue for the long term.
All right. Any questions here? Anybody wants to ask? Yes. So that, if I can paraphrase, do you have to be a larger organization to reach out to larger calls, or can a like one person outfit?
Yeah, generally speaking, that's kind of
Yeah.
my concern, and you know, if you don't have this infrastructure or this long-standing, established company
Right,
with
right.
shareholders, sometimes it's kind of intimidating to apply for anything.
Right, of course.
I mean, are there smaller grants for technologies?
Smaller grants for technologies, yeah, okay.
Yeah. There are, not through the portal that I was showing there on the UN agencies, but I mean, with specialized services like you described, and if you register as an individual for the just on the basic registration, you'd probably find something. But for the kinds of things that you're talking about, like securing investment capital for environmental technology or something, the government of Canada has programs for that. They do have investment programs for that. But usually you have to put in some of the capital, like upwards of 40 or 50%. Sometimes, if you're lucky, 20%. But if it's under 100, there's definitely portals for that. Under 50, sometimes they even have calls for that. But those are under innovation portals. Typically not through the international window, but more like through Economic Development Canada, or the regional economic development agencies. Like in Southern Ontario, they have Southern Ontario Development Agency, or Quebec, they have a Quebec, ACOA in Atlantic Canada. The other way around that, though, too, is that's sort of the question you asked is very relevant when it comes to partnering. And you're not the first person who's been approached by gangsters who don't want competition, by the way. You need to get some other guys to partner with you to get those guys out of the mix, right? And get them off your shoulder, if you know what I mean. Because the market is supposed to be open. There's supposed to be competition. Anybody who doesn't want competition is engaging in anti-competitive practices, which is certainly not good. There are representatives in the region here who can help you, though. There's trade commissioners who you can go to get specific advice from if you're talking about exporting technology. But for grants and things like that, you'd have to go to the Regional Economic Development Agency.
All right, I think I'm going to call it at that. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending this workshop today, and thank you again to our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Well done. Yeah, thank you. That's great. Thank you. We covered a lot of
Sure.
short.
Yeah, I get that all the time. I'm the practice leader at the firm that I work for. I'm in charge of performance measurement.
I like your tips, though.
University